Reports are coming in that the Chancellor, Kwasi Out, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is due to be replaced. The other reports seem to be saying that Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, is going to have some sort of chinwag, little conference, little chit-chat, round about 1400 today. Obviously, what's been going on in the markets with the bond prices, with the banks and the insurance companies rushing across and asking the Bank of England to bail them out because of some of the highly leveraged positions that they seem to have taken in regard to these liability defined investments. Basically, they have exited from having bonds, gilts, and they bought either futures or swaps or some form of leveraged to try and increase the return, because the bond rates are not sufficient to pay the defined benefits. This has been an up and down roller coaster for the past 2 to 3 weeks since the mini budget fiscal event, whatever you want to call it. There seems to be, if not a coup, then certainly an orchestrated attempt by basically the forces at large to get things changed. You can take two views from it, or you can take more than two. The first view would be is that it was possibly not the best policy to announce all of the tax breaks when you can't show how you're going to fund them. People jump to the conclusion that if you are not funding them, you're not showing the line of funding, that it's going to be more borrowing. But there seems to be a reasonable amount of hypocrisy around the borrowing. It's okay to borrow for COVID. It's okay to borrow for COVID so that you can pay money in extortionate amounts to PPE, friends of friends, getting contracts. That's okay to borrow that money, but apparently it's not okay to borrow the money to basically help people out with their lecky bills or to reduce people's taxation. The 45% tax rate was round about, I think, 3% of the total taxes that were going to be reduced. So that got walked back, U-turned, cancelled. But what it looks like is now that more than likely the corporation tax will be getting taken back. So whether that gets changed from 19 to 20 or 22 instead of the 25 that it was going to go to, I would tend to think is that the plebs, everybody screaming and shouting, the papers, the left-wing media and left-wing TV stations, will all be screaming for it to go to 25%, if not more. Why not make it 50? Let's go the whole hog and increase it. I'm not too sure of the effect that has, because basically what you're saying is you're going to make all of these companies in the markets have less profits. If there's less profits, then the shares realistically need to go down to reflect that. The other side is you can say it's a conspiracy, and that people are just out to get poor Kwasi for whatever reason. You can draw your own reasons for that. You can say it's a conspiracy, that the deep state don't like it. The Bank of England is part of the deep state. The people that control the banks, and let's face it, the banks control the country by the sounds of it. If the banks get into problem, then they get bailed out. If the banks make a profit, they get to keep it. So you could say that the banks didn't like the fiscal event mini budget a couple of weeks ago, and they've stamped their feet and they've told their lackey, basically the Bank of England, you need to buy all of this underperforming gilts off our hands. We don't want to have them. We want shot of them, and put them on your books and you can take the loss. And in a couple of weeks' time, when the prices have changed again, we might think about buying them back. There seems to be some sort of friction between the Chancellor and the Bank of England. They don't seem to be rowing in the same direction. There's been some words from the Chancellor basically saying the Bank of England have been underperforming. It would be hard to disagree with that statement. The Bank of England has basically like a dual mandate, price and fiscal type of stability, with an emphasis on keeping inflation round about the 2% mark. There's tram lines that it's supposed to keep within 3% and 1%. If it can't do that, it's got to write a little letter to the Chancellor telling them what the recovery plan is. The Bank of England for the last 18 months has been wayward. It has not kept inflation at 2%. It's allowed inflation to rip. It's allowed inflation in most people's terms to go far too high. The consumer price index, the CPI in the UK, is around about 10%. If you believe that, I've got 5 or 6 bridges across the Tyne. You can have any one you want for £1 million, and I'm prepared to sell that to you now over the net. If you believe that, CPI is 10%. For most people, I would think it's way north of 10%. And it seems not to be subsiding. It seems to be going even higher. If it goes higher, your purchasing power goes down. Your wages buy less. We're getting into a maelstrom of other things being drawn into this. People now want at least 10% wage rise to catch up, just so that they're where they were. The government's benefit system and the money that it pays out for pensions and all of the social programmes that it does. Truss was possibly talking about tying this to the rate of pay rises rather than the rate of inflation. By doing that, the rate of pay rises are around about 5%. The rate of inflation with this mythical CPI is 10% plus. You can see it's a huge amount of money that the government has to stump up. Where's it going to get that increase from? Possibly more borrowing. There's lots of other programmes which the government does, which nobody seems to be bothered about, but which are nibbling away and chewing through billions of pounds a year. Take a look at the government's books, see where it's spending its money. This debt has been ongoing. It's a mismanagement by Johnson. It's a mismanagement by May. It's a mismanagement by Cameron. It's a mismanagement by Brown. It's a mismanagement by Blair. It's a mismanagement by, who was the other guy before Blair? The grey guy, him. It's a mismanagement by them all. This is just trundled along. People have been kicking the can down the road. Truss has come along and said, no more can kicking. We're going to try and change the game. We're going to try and get ourselves out of the mess by borrowing in some money to give people tax breaks to hopefully improve and extend and resize the GDP upwards. That's what Truss was saying. Make the pie bigger. The conspiracies will say there's dark forces in the background that are trying to prevent this from happening. It's fine to spend billions of pounds giving it to, in essence, US drug companies. It's fine to give billions of pounds to companies for test and trace. It's fine to give lots of money on a continuing basis for PPE. All of these things, absolutely no problem. But when you're trying to give money to the people of the UK, to money off the Lecky, reduce the NIC, wow, this is a real big problem. Now, I can understand it from the point of view that the deficit is too big. But the deficit was too big 2 years ago when the penny was on the go. But they still spent all of that money. Nobody queried that. No, it's just all got to get paid. There you go, paid out, pay. All of that money paid out. Deficit, debt, UK debt, north of 2 trillion, depending on which government report you read, somewhere in the region of 2.3 to 2.4, rapidly going up. 2.3 trillion pounds. That's 2,300 million pounds. It's in the region of £70,000 per taxpayer the debt that the government's got on everybody's behalf. The problem comes when the debt for the 70,000 has to be funded. The interest has to be paid. When the interest rates like last year and that was 0.1%, it wasn't that difficult. Now the interest rates are 2.5%, rapidly going up. They're going up because they're trying to keep up with the American banks that's putting their rates up. American banks are sucking money out of Europe, sucking money out of the UK, putting it into America. You can get a better rate. If you play that game, your exchange rate and the exchange rate with the dollar, both the euro and the pound have went down because they haven't put their rates up commensurate to keep pace with the Americans. Will the Chancellor go? By the sounds of it, and there's absolutely no information now which doesn't get leaked or given to the press ahead of time. So years ago it used to be like this in America. You can't keep a secret for 2 minutes because somebody will spill the beans. And it's a sign of the times with the amount of coverage, TV, radio, newspapers. Now the stuff comes out straight away. So basically, Liz Truss, the Chancellor, he'll probably say, I'm going, I've become the story, and that can't be for the sake of the party, unity, the good of the government, blah, blah, blah. I've decided to stand down, spend more time with my family, that sort of caper. And he'll assume a massive responsibility for what's going on. That gives Truss a fighting chance, depending on who she puts in, is the new Chancellor. Basically what they're going to do, gut the whole of the mini budget and say, yeah, it didn't happen, just erase it from history. We'll do a 1984 on it. It just never happened. We're back to where we were 3 weeks ago. I'm unsure if that'll work because you've got the media people who are basically just inciting as much desperation, fear as they can. It's the standard operating thing for most of the TV and newspapers. They've got to have an end of the world scenario, as though the events in Ukraine weren't near enough end of the world for you. We've got to ramp it up all of the time. So it looks like Kwasi's had a couple of weeks as Chancellor. I'm not too sure if he beat the other lad that was in, that Boris had. I think we've had about 3 or 4 or 5 Chancellors. It's just a revolving door for the Chancellors, or it has been. Whoever comes now is only got a guarantee till basically 2024, 18-month time basically, before there's a general election. So it depends. So you can work through. One thing you could say is that these reports are wrong. I don't think that'll happen. The second thing is who is going to be of sufficient standing that could fill the post. So would Sunak be prepared to come back as Chancellor to help things out? Stranger things have happened. I personally think that that's a long shot. I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything's possible. Whoever comes in basically has to just about tear the whole thing up, get the Office of Budget Sustainability, or whatever it's termed, to come in and rubber stamp that the new deficit is sustainable, that we can pay it off, and it's not profligate. Meanwhile, we're just going to have a bout of austerity. All the government departments have been told to look for savings. We need to stop spending money on this. We need to stop spending the money on that. Guaranteed, it'll be things that people normally need and want. The health service has managed a new record. There's 7 million people apparently on waiting lists. It's focusing on things that are not core. There's too much time and effort being spent, possibly by Johnson and by Truss, on Ukraine. It's not central to the UK. Some people will argue, yes, it is, democracy, freedom, and all this sort of caper. And most people don't go that way. They say the big three things for most people are jobs. Have they got a job? Is it reasonable paying? Education for their kids. Are their kids getting a reasonable education? Will the education and training when they leave school, enable them to get a job and support themselves and have a reasonable lifestyle. And the third thing is the health service. Is the health service fit for use? At the present time, the NHS seems to be lagging. Education-wise, people complain about that. And jobs-wise, people complain about the rates of pay and the lack of well-paying jobs. But here presto, Prime Ministers are determined to waltz around the world, spend lots of time and energy on possibly elements that are not central to the UK. The deficit has been there for years. Nobody wants to do anything about it. The real reason why nobody wants to do anything about it is because the banks make too much money from it. It's as simple as that. The government doesn't want to do anything about it because it's the easy option. What's happened is Truss and Kwasi have rattled the cages. They've changed things. The banks don't like that. The banks have got on the red hotline. They've told the Bank of England, get yourself across here, get your wheelbarrow down here, buy all these rubbish bonds that we've got because the prices have gone down, because the rates have gone up, and we are losing money on it. We need to be bailed out pronto. So Bailey's done that. He's come up with some mock. It's all got to be done by the end of the week. What hasn't been publicised so much is that they've come up with another method of bailing out banks, insurance companies, hedge funds, anybody that's got bonds that they want to get shot of. It's called the Temporary Expanded Collateral Repro Facility. It's by some people's definition just a reworked quantitative easing, i.e. it's another buy-in of assets by the Bank of England with magic keyboard money to it's assistant liquidity, of course. Yes, of course it is. Yeah, it enables people that have got bonds to park them with the bank. The bank can then park them with the Bank of England for safekeeping. Bank of England will then give them a little bit of money on it. It's incestuous. The whole thing's incestuous. The Bank of England and the banks, to my mind, are one and the same thing. They're working against the best interests of the bulk of the people in the UK. They love inflation. They love inflation at a reasonable rate because then it puts everybody to sleep. People don't notice it. Your bag of crisps has went up by a penny in 2 years. Nobody's noticing that. When your bag of crisps goes up 10 pence and the next year goes up by 15 pence, people notice these things. Insert whatever you want, bag of crisps, pint of beer, Mars bar, wherever. Food is going up at a lick. People are noticing it. Inflation is being brought out of the closet and stage central. Now, from grannies all of the way down, everybody's saying the same thing. Inflation, cost of living. You've got people on strike. You've got the barristers on strike. You've got the post office on strike. You've got the trains, people wanting to be on strike. Some of them are striking for different things. But at the bottom of a lot of it is they all want more money. They all want more money because the cost of living's gone up. Means the purchasing power has gone down. Means the standard of living's went down. MPs get a rise. All the friends of MPs made a bunch of money in the panny, selling all this rubbish PPE to people and stuff like that. Why can't we have a few quids out of it? That's what's happening. People can see. They can see the hypocrisy in Parliament. People can see all of this going on. The natives are getting restless. Oh. So, there'll be a meeting, there'll be some verbiage, Kwasi will exit stage left. We'll get somebody else in, we'll then kick out all of these policies, and then we'll wait and see what happens with the markets, whether they like it or not, or whether the banks can sense blood and they can try and screw the government for even more money. When I say the government, I mean the people of the UK. The people of the UK are the ones that get shafted in all of these things. The bankers won't lose their bonuses. The bankers will make money in the good times. The bankers in the bad times, if it looks like it's been a bad time, then they will dump all of their rubbish assets on the Bank of England and the people of the UK, the taxpayers. And that includes companies. It's not just people. Will all have to shell out so that the banks don't lose money. Everybody's just living in a compound. The banks own the compound. That's it. You're just a wage slave if you've got a job. Time for a cup of tea.